Well, hello, folks. Welcome to Impact AI, your show for cutting through the hype and finding what actually works in AI and data. Today's guest is Greg Gillespie, co-founder of Collectiv, a rapidly growing analytics and AI enablement firm that's made the Inc. 5000 list twice. Greg brings a unique blend of technical rigor, real-world impact. He's the creator of the trademark data formula, a practical framework aimed at preparing organizations for AI success through better governance, aligned processes, empowering teams, and scalable automation. Greg, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, John. Looking forward to talking with you.
To kick things off, can you share a bit about your journey, how you went from building structured data programs in an industrial setting to helping organize organizations operationalize AI readiness at scale?
Yeah, sure thing. So it's quite I don't know if it's a unique journey, but it's mine. So I went into engineering, as my profession. I got a job at an electrical distribution plant, and some of the first projects I got as an engineer was about collecting data through SCADA systems, automated media infrastructure systems where you collated all kind of data and then you ran that against engineering models. And that's really where I kind of, fell in love with data. I'm like, look at all this stuff, look how much, analysis we can do with things. And that kind of led me to another opportunity to where I was dealing with manufacturing data and energy data. And we were trying to, help large manufacturing organizations to become more efficient in a variety of ways, whether that was with energy, whether that was with their manufacturing processes and things like that, which essentially led me to where I'm at today. And that is with business intelligence using the Microsoft data stack to collate all your information from all ERPs, your sales systems, your financial operational systems, all that kind of stuff, and then putting that into a centralized reporting model like Microsoft Power BI that we focus in, and then helping organizations in that matter. So kind of a strange journey from electrical engineer to now business intelligence, consulting owner, but it's really kind of that path that I kind of always knew I wanted to be some type of business owner and consulting, and found my way there through data. And it's something that I love because it's just you have all this information at your fingertips, but actually being able to quantify and do something with that data is the big thing that everybody's trying to solve. And solving problems is kind of like what engineers do. So I guess that's what I'm doing. I'm just doing it with data now. So
Yeah. What so where was the point that originally sparked your interest in data strategy and AI? Like you just described how you transitioned from engineering to that. Was there an event or something that sparked that interest?
so I would say, with a lot of my early consulting gigs that I would get with, Power BI and data aggregation and all that, a lot of what we were seeing was organizations would say, hey, we want this report, or we want this report made, that report made, but they were just doing it on an ad hoc basis. And they weren't really taking a very strategic a very strategic approach at how they really need to be organizing their data as a whole and then setting themselves up for long-term success. They were just kind of patching a hole. And so when we noticed that, time and time again with all kinds of companies, whether they were small or large, we're like, there's a need for strategy here to really come in, talk with organizations and say, let's put a plan in place. Let's really figure out where you're at and where you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
And then we're going to help build that data infrastructure around that plan with a strategy, with a governance strategy in place with all your data to kind of set you up for success, and not just, patching a hole just because you need a data report, today.
Right, right. Well, so ranging from engineering to starting to build these firms,
Mm-hmm.
what motivated you to develop this data formula it says it's trademarked. That is true,
Yeah,
right?
that's
Yeah.
true. Yep.
Okay, so explain that a little bit and what motivated you to develop that.
Yeah. So obviously a lot of the stuff in the data formula is something that we've been doing, since we started Collectiv back in 2019. But what really motivated me to kind of get something in place and get it out there was this, was the AI push that's going on right now. So
Right, right,
you can't get away from any social media, LinkedIn post that's not talking about AI. And
right.
it's real. It's a huge movement right now. It's exciting. I'm grasping it, Collective's grasping it. But what a lot of organizations are not recognizing is that if we're really going to use AI the right way, we still got to get a lot of things in place first. And that's where the data formula comes in. And I kind of took a step back and say, like, how do we get this messaging out that really prepares companies to embrace AI, to what I'm calling AI enablement, right? To where how do we actually enable AI in the organization in the right way? And to me, that was by using what I call the data formula. That's by focusing on our data, aligning on our processes, getting our team in place, getting them prepared to adopt that, and then finally putting an automation in place once we have those three things enabled. So it's really about preparing yourself for AI with everything that you already have in place. And it's really different. Like if you're going to do, even a data project, if you're going to, say we're going to create all this data infrastructure that's going to facilitate reporting, that's Power BI reporting, Tableau, what have you. You've got to do a lot of these same things, but it's much more important now with AI so close in the advancements that are being made with AI because everybody wants it, but they're not ready for it
Hmm.
in the
Yeah,
sense of a large scale deployment. You can go and use ChatGPT and maybe do some, process automation, but if you want to do it fully at scale, that's where the data formula really comes in play because it gets you prepared to enable your whole organization or a portion of your organization that can then be scaled across, that you can then scale it across the rest of the company. So,
yeah. That's cool. It's intuitive. So we'll go now towards some questions that are oriented towards democratizing data.
okay.
And is it can it be done too much, too little? Is it a double-edged sword?
Yeah.
So what's your take on the current push to democratize data? Is broad access always beneficial, or are we missing some hidden risks and all that?
Yeah. So, when we talk about democratizing data, just kind of so I can set the stage, what that means to me is that we have all this information organization and we want to give that data to everybody out there, basically, because more data at anyone's fingertips basically means the more efficient and the more effective I can be at my job. And I'm all on board with that. But in order to be on board with that, like you can't just be giving people data and access to information that may not be vetted yet. It may not be, validated. You got to make sure that if you and I, John, are looking at like revenue numbers, you and I have the same metric of revenue and not like revenue dash one or revenue dash three. And I say this stuff because when people are building metrics or they're building data models out, a lot of times what happens is you're working through this so fast, you're doing validation, you're doing measure creation, and the next thing you know is you got 3 or 5 versions of that measure. One of them is finally accurate and right, but
Yeah,
the other 4 don't go away and they stay in there. And then you end up getting to a board meeting. One person presents, $100 million. The other person presents 90, 95. And then the executive saying like, what the heck, how can I trust this? Everything blows up and, people
yeah,
get upset. So I'm all on board for democratizing data, but if we're going to do that, we have to put the time in place to get our governance in place, all the processes right so that things are clean because it's the same old saying, garbage in, garbage out. And if you're not following that, you're going to end up, you can give people data, but if they can't trust it, you're not going to be able to get anywhere with it.
right. In your experience, does opening up data beyond specialized teams lead to inconsistencies, misinterpretations, or governance gaps?
I think it depends, but I would say a lot of times what I see is you've got to start at a small scale and you got to start with a variety of things. It's kind of like that data formula that I was talking about.
Yeah,
You got to understand where your data is currently at. You got to understand where you're at with your processes. And you got to understand how your team reacts to the existing data. And then once you make that assessment, I like to target specific departments. So maybe our financial department is going to be our cheerleader. They're really good at it because they're already honed in on the data, and the data is pretty well vetted already. Maybe that's the right place to start. Maybe it's your sales team. Maybe your sales teams or they're rock stars at the data. Maybe that's one area you want to focus on. Um, I keep coming back to, you just got to make sure that as you start making data available for the entire organization, which should be the goal of every organization, you just got to make sure that the messaging is clear of why we're doing this and how it's going to enable people to get there. But then finding that cheerleader inside the organization, which is the department that can show how well they are using it and how it's making their lives easier, that just helps you get there so much quicker if you're trying to adopt this whole democratizing data concept, which
Yeah.
I say should be something everybody's doing. But kind of lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah. One thing I don't like doing is just like, basically limiting people, to
Mm,
not giving them access. So there is like a fine line. Like you just don't want to say like, hey, you can't do anything unless you do it within these boundaries. Like I do want people to get out there and just kind of be a little curious and start creating things.
right.
But if you are sharing data, if you're sharing reporting at a mass scale that's being utilized to make decisions, that's when you got to make sure, if this stuff's being shared out there, you got to make sure that
Yeah.
that it is validated and it's accurate. There's no harm to letting people play around with it and doing their own analysis, but if they're sharing that and they're making decisions on that data, that's when you got to actually make sure it's clean and accurate.
Yeah, exactly. And then I'm sure there's security involved in there
Oh
as
yeah,
well.
we go down a rabbit hole on security.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, so where does your data formula step in to mitigate chaos from the unstructured access, and how does it ensure AI readiness?
Yeah. So the data piece, making sure you have your data accessible, making sure it's clean, making sure we have it accurate and ready to go to be consumed. But really on the process side is where that comes into play. So you want to make sure you have things in place like potentially a center of excellence and basically a governing body within inside of your organization that controls how we release new data, who has access to it, who doesn't have access to it. How do we put in a new metric? How do we put in a new measure? Who has the rights to say it's right or wrong? What's that whole process look like? So you want to have that in place, and really it doesn't have to be. It sounds complicated. It sounds like a long, big process, but it really doesn't have to be. If you're a smaller organization, it could just be one person who's in charge of it, and it might take up 5 hours of their time a week once you get it in place. If you're a large organization, we've seen a BI team kind of be their center of excellence. They have these rules and policies of how new data models get released out there, and how this relates to AI is important because these processes are important for how you're releasing data, into the organization. Because as you put AI on top of these data models, you're putting AI on top of these data lakes of all the stuff that's been vetted. You want to make sure it's clean. So then, as you introduce a new component, let's say you're adding in a new, let's say you're adding in Salesforce into your organization, or you're adding in a new third party tool that has more data for you, like Google Analytics. As you're adding that in, it's got to go through this whole vetting process of how the data gets cleaned and then put into the data model that then AI can tap into. So I would say that's how we're seeing things need to be done. And it's really, if you think of AI as like just another individual who can take your data and produce insights for you, but do it much faster, it's really what we're saying is the same thing we've always been saying is these processes, this concept that's always been around. It's just more important now because AI can get you these insights so much more faster. You just got to put the time and the legwork in up front in order to get to those insights in that time
Right.
frame. That's
Yeah.
that's really the key. This is nothing new. It's just so much more important. Like if you want to get a leg up on your competition, or if you want to, see that high growth mode that you're trying to get to with the data you have at hand, you got to put this stuff in play. Otherwise, you're going to be doing the same stuff over and over again because AI is that tool that's going to help you get there.
Yeah. Can uh, from a decision maker standpoint, can too much democratization slow down the decision making, or dilute perhaps accountability. I guess in larger, this would probably be for a larger business, I would assume. But
Yeah.
what do you think from a decision maker standpoint?
Yeah, so I think I think from a decision maker standpoint, like just giving everybody access to like just giving all obviously you can't just say like here's all the data, go have fun with it
Right,
without putting the stuff in place. But I don't know. I think if you do all these things that I'm talking about and you have the data validated, there is absolutely no harm to giving that to your employees because um that's just going to empower them to do their job even better than they're
right,
already doing it. As long as that data is accurate and clean, and you're doing everything you can to keep it that way. There's
right,
no, I mean, the risk is not doing that. If you're not doing that and you're just saying, "Here's the data," yeah, then you have your team making decisions on information that may not be fully accurate, and then the next thing you know, somebody makes a decision that causes you know a decrease in revenue, a decrease in profitability, and that's where people get in trouble.
yeah, I got you. So that's good. And as you answer these questions, it's like it um it changes my perspective on some of these other questions. Like
Yeah.
the next one, we're going to have to modify a little bit. It says, well, what's the alternative? If widespread access isn't the answer, which we're not really saying it's bad,
Right.
we're just saying that certain measures have to be in place. But how should organizations balance, I guess, empowerment with discipline to succeed in AI? Which, I mean, you've kind of hit on it already. Uh,
Yeah.
but do you feel like the data formula covers all this already, or do you? I mean, what else is there out there to be done?
Um, I mean, I think the data formula does that.
Okay,
It's the hidden layers underneath the data formula to where you get down into the details to where it helps you get to that point. And listen, like you could like organizations, I'm not saying you have to implement the data formula everywhere, but you don't have to do it at a full scale. But I think if you're going to do anything right with inside your organization with data, you need to apply this concept in some way, shape, or form.
yeah,
Meaning, like, you don't have to say, like, hey, we're going to do this, full blown, the entire organization is going to follow this new policy. If you do that, that's great because you're creating a culture that is centered around data and it's centered around accuracy,
yeah,
adoption, and basically embracing ourselves to enable AI, which you're embracing yourself to enable data basically at the front end of things. And then
yeah,
that enablement of the data is what is going to enable you to utilize AI throughout your organization. And you can still, I mean, you could still use AI today. You could automate a process with it, whether that's we're going to create sales proposals now with a GPT instead of, going through this, 4-step process of it gets handed off to this person and this executive, this assistant, et cetera. I mean, a GPT can do all that stuff for you. You have
right,
to have accurate data or accurate processes to feed it to get there. But if we're starting to look at, can AI start predicting my forecast better? Can AI help me predict my margin based upon project trends, based upon all these things? Can it create a report, find hidden value for me with inside of actual, numbers? That's where you got to start putting this stuff into play.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if I went down the wrong path there.
No, no, no. I mean, it was like I said, that's exactly what I was getting at. We had to modify the question a little
Yeah.
bit, but so
One thing
what's that?
if you don't mind, I'll kind of go on to like something I like, an analogy I like to use a lot with
Sure.
this data formula. So I see AI as like just basically another tool that's been given to us. So if you kind of take a step back, I've always preached that you got to have the tools, and I came up with this whole concept to where you know growing up where I was at, construction was it's a big trade in the area. And I grew up doing construction work, concrete construction, roofing houses, things like that. Um, that turned into roofing houses for the rest of the family every time somebody needed a new roof. So we'd always do it the old school way. We'd use a hammer and a nail. Well, then I got after one of those, I said, we're not doing this anymore. We're going to get a nail gun out.
Right.
And after getting the nail gun out and getting that roof knocked out, and half the time that was huge. And then my dad and I would always say, like, you just got to have the tools, right, to get it
That's
done.
right. Yeah.
And so what we would, so that you got to have the tools was just a saying we'd say for everything, So you're working on a wash machine and you just don't have that right tool. And if you had that right tool, it'd be done in 5 minutes rather
That's
than an
right.
hour,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And then I looked at that as like, man, that applies to everything. And that's
Yeah.
the same thing, like whether you're using Excel, whether you're using Power BI, whether you're using something, you got to have the tools to get the job done right.
Sure.
Quit your exporting the data, all that out there. And that's the same thing with AI. Like AI is a tool. It's like you've got to have the tools to get your job done. So if you can use AI, if you think of it as a tool that's going to help you get to that next level of, where you want to be at in your organization, it's going to help you get there even further. But what I found out around that is I started looking at this a little bit further. And again, this isn't rocket science. This is the stuff that we all know. But every great tool still needs a great process around it. So kind of going back to the roofing houses or even building houses, like I could use a nail gun, but if I don't know how to use that nail gun the right way, it's still going to take me just as long to roof that house if I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And
Right.
that's the same thing with AI. If I'm not using that tool, if I'm not surrounding it with the right processes, i.e., the data formula to get me to the level I want to be, you're going to waste time. So if any of those things fall out of place in the data formula, like for example, if I get my data and I get my processes right, but I don't have my team prepared, AI is going to fail because the team's not prepared. You haven't
Right.
got them up to speed on it. If I've got my team prepared, but my data is crap yet, it doesn't matter if my team's ready for it. They're getting information that doesn't make sense because I
Yeah.
haven't validated. Same thing with processes. If my processes aren't in place to keep my data up to date, if I'm not feeding my data, basically information that gives it more value to the AI, then I'm not getting the right value out of that tool, the AI tool at the end of the day. So I always like to make that analogy because if your AI needs to be treated as a tool, you still got to surround it with the right processes that you do with any other tool that you enable inside your organization.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I like the simple approach to that. So what is the latest and greatest at Collectiv? Anything new on the horizon, or what's the status right now?
yeah, no, that's it's a great question. So there's a lot of good stuff going on at Collectiv right now. So as you know, we are a consulting firm that focuses primarily in the Microsoft data stack, and that includes tools like Azure, Azure Synapse. We actually do Databricks underneath the Azure umbrella as well. That's a big thing that we're seeing a lot more movement with. It also involves Microsoft Fabric and Power BI. So if you're not familiar with Fabric, what it basically is, it's basically the umbrella of the data platform underneath this new logo called Fabric, where you have Power BI underneath there. You're seeing tools like Azure Data Factory, data lakes. They're all being brought underneath the Fabric umbrella, and that's really where I see a lot of excitement for us. Is we're basically Microsoft's doing this huge consolidation of tools underneath the Fabric
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep saying umbrella, but it's like really the Fabric umbrella. And then that's really what I think is going to set everybody up for the AI enablement, which they've already done. They've released some things called data agents. So as long as your data is underneath there, you've got it vetted out, you put some of these processes in place, you can tap these data agents onto your data models, your data lakes. You can start asking it questions about what's going on. You can train it. So that's really where I'm excited about is once you have your data in place, then you can start tapping some of these GPTs or so-called data agents onto those models and
Yeah.
start asking it questions. And that's just the beginning. I mean, we're just within 1 year of that. So, I mean, I'm excited to see what that could be in the next year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. So it's pretty
Yeah.
exciting stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we're helping people with. We're helping them get ready for that and putting all that together, whether that's from a strategy front or an implementation front.
That's excellent. And right as that comes out, you'll get really good at it, and then something else is going to
Something
come
else to come out. Yeah, that's
out.
technology.
Yeah.
That's how it works. Um, But hey, that's why I'm in this. I don't like staying on the same path. I like a
I
little bit
know.
of change, which is, with this new AI movement, with everything going on, it's kind of giving me some more energy to basically be like, hey, all right, because Power BI came out in 2015. Still think it's a great tool, but I was getting to the point to where I was like, all right, what what else we got? And AI came out, and we're like, all right, I think this is the next thing that's going to fuel some energy for me.
Yeah, buy you some time for sure.
Yeah,
Well, excellent, Greg. I think that was a great discussion. Thanks for dismantling the myth that more access is always better. But your frameworks bring clarity and structure where the data initiatives also are often go astray. So I hope our listeners now understand why democratizing data without guardrails can do more harm than good.
sure.
And well, wonderful. So for our listeners, if they want to find out more about Collectiv, and where can they reach you?
Yeah, for sure. So you can always go to our website, which is gocollective.com without the at the end. Or you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message if you just have a question. If you just want to check out what's going on, I love connecting with people, seeing what they have going on. We also have a LinkedIn company page of Collective. So, like I said, I think the best way is, LinkedIn or our website. And then
Okay,
also, I forgot, we also have a YouTube channel that has a lot of how-to videos out there, and there's just a lot of strategy videos of what's going on in this whole industry.
wonderful. Well, folks, join us next time on Impact AI when we challenge another popular idea in the AI world. Until then, keep making an impact. Thank you.
Thanks, John.